Welcome to UGC E-Pathashala program. The course is on Japanese history and society. The module is Fall of Tokugawa. Tokugawa period, as you understand, constitutes one of the most important medieval creative period of Japanese history. Tokugawa period actually began from 1602 and that ends up to 1852. It is neat 250 years period in medieval Japanese history. By way of introduction, we would just like to state few points. The decline of Tokugawa shogunate marked the transition period between feudalism and primitive capitalism, otherwise modern Japan. The causes for the decline can be divided into two categories. One is the internal crisis and other is the external pressure. Tokugawa Ieyasu established the Tokugawa shogunate in the year 1603. The Tokugawa shogunate was marked by a system of centralized feudalism. The emperor was at the top of the hierarchical pyramid with only nominal powers. His court was in Kyoto. Kyoto is in Honshu main island of Japan, which is in the central part of Honshu or central Japan. The real power rested with the shogun, whose court was in Edo or Tokyo. Edo is the older name of Tokyo, and Tokyo is a modern name of Tokyo, which is now the capital city of Japan. And Tokugawa Ieyasu, that is the shogun, he can be considered as the chief feudal lord who had his own domain of land stretching across the vast areas of Japan. Social structure of Japan is very important to know during the feudal period, that is the Tokugawa period. Below the shogun came the daimyos or feudal lords who numbered nearly 250. They had separate domains spread throughout Japan. Samurais were placed under the daimyos and they were family based warriors who owned allegiance to their feudal lord for fixed rice stipends. Lowest in the hierarchy were non-arm bearing commoners, ordinary people who were also peasants. Then there were artisans, also there were merchant class. The very pyramid of structure, social structure, which is partially also political, of Tokugawa feudal Japan can be seen this way. At the top is the emperor, as you see, next is the shogun, followed by daimyos, then you have samurais. You also have ronin. The word in Japanese is assigned to masterless samurais who were independent and who really had neither the title nor the assignment. Next you have peasants who were large in number, actually in charge of cultivating the lands. Then you have the artisans who were the construction workers, and beneath them you have merchants. Merchants always came at the end of the social hierarchy because Japan believed, because they are dealing with money. So anything that deals with money, any individuals who handle money, cash actually, they were considered not very important in the social hierarchy. Therefore, they were placed in the lowest of the ladder. Now you have internal crisis. Actually, it was a complex situation of social crisis. The daimyos were discontented, samurais were discontented, merchants were discontented, then peasants equally were discontented. Financial crisis also was occurring, and natural calamities actually galore throughout Japan, throughout historical period. And even in contemporary days, we see Japanese archipelago beset with regular or frequent earthquakes, tsunamis, etc. And also we have the Satsuma Choshu alliance, which was very strong, that came about championing the cause of revolution or restoration. The daimyo discontent can be slightly explained this way. Sankin Kotai means alternate attendance. This alternate attendance of the daimyos, this is a system called Sankin Kotai, and this caused a very heavy expenditure on the daimyos because they have to maintain an establishment in the headquarter, and also they have to have their own establishment in their own domain. So managing financial burden because of two establishments, and also moving the entire paraphernalia from one place to other place. It was by compulsion, rather it was mandatory that daimyos have to live physically with all their paraphernalias in Edo, that is Tokyo, and rest in their own territory or their own province or their own domain. Thus, this was heavy economic burden on the daimyos. They were rather discontented, not that all the daimyos were rich, nor that all of them were poor. So, they were all classes in economic sense of daimyos: the rich daimyo, the powerful daimyo, the large daimyo, the effective less daimyos. So, they were rather discontented because the system continued for a very long time. To maintain the expenses, the daimyos converted rice into money by selling in Osaka warehouse. Osaka actually hosted one of the largest rice warehouse in the entire Japan. So, actually dealing via Osaka and Osaka warehouses, rice had its largest product that was traded in wholesome. And this also led to money economy and alliance of daimyos between and within certain regions in Japan, and also with the merchants, sometimes even with the ronin. This is map of Japan. For example, you see central Japan, the largest island of Japan is Honshu. The southernmost part is also available in purple color for you, which is corresponding almost to present day Yamaguchi prefecture, where Choshu was most strong daimyos those days. And you have then nearly some in the Shikoku, some in Kyushu. So, these huge daimyo families or powerful daimyo families, they had some alliances between them. Some of the 4 major most powerful daimyos of the interregnum period was, we call in Japanese, Sachodohi, Satsuma, Hizen, Tosa and Chosu. So, these 4 had their alliance, particularly 2 of the 4 largest had their alliance. That had really brought a huge strength in organizing a protest against or a rebellion against the establishment and seize power. This is actually a daimyo mansion maintained in Edo, that is in Tokyo. You can see how lavish life they led. Must be one of the picture corresponding to one of the rich daimyos maintained in Tokyo. Equally of the similar size also was in his own domain. So, double establishment, Sankin Kotai practice of alternate residence actually corresponds to these type of lifestyles. Samurai discontent can be explained due to the long period of peace, and samurai lost their utility and reduced to bureaucrats, many of them, and they also depended on fixed rice stipend by the state or by the lord. The rise of merchants and daimyos became cause for their own frustration. Some broke loose of their daimyo and became ronin. Ronin again is masterless samurai. The very symbol of samurai is carrying sword. By edict, it was banned. So, many of the samurais who have lost their swords had also virtually become masterless. So, they were called in Japanese ronin. Because most ardent supporters of emperor's restoration were also samurais, and 2 major daimyo families. The higher ranking samurai got appointed at higher offices as bureaucrats and also resenting the lower ranking ones. Peasant discontent need to be explained. Peasants contributed indirectly towards the Tokugawa decline because they turned to moneylenders facing pressures of money economy, mortgaging land. Moneylenders became cultivators of lands. Peasant uprisings and riots against the moneylenders, merchants and daimyos, thus weakening the Tokugawa system. The Kuge discontent. The Kuge had lost all prestige that they got before the Tokugawa rule. They actively participated in building an alliance against the shogun. Their alliance with dissident daimyo was called Kobbu Gattai or Court Military Alliance. Financial crisis and natural calamities also was quite prevalent throughout. The obsolete taxation system did not tax the rising wealth in agriculture and among merchants uniformly. The efforts for reform did not succeed at all. The natural calamities in the 1830s also made the situation very bad for the Tokugawa rule. The external crisis also should be taken note of. Commodore Matthew Perry arrived in Japan in the year 1853 and he returned in 1854 after warning the locals that he would return next year and force Japan to conclude commercial treaties, however equal or unequal, with the US. And this Treaty of Kanagawa was signed in the year 1854. The treaty allowed for two ports of Shimoda and Hakodate to be opened for American ships. Shimoda is actually located in Izu area, present day Shizuoka prefecture. Shimoda is also a mountainous hilly town and the port town, and actually there is a temple today called Ryosanji temple. It is in that temple that decision making meeting was held whether or not to sign the treaty. Ultimately, if one stands atop this mountain, in today for visitors pleasure, telescopes are fixed, through that one can see the sea Pacific, where and from where actually Perry and his paraphernalia entered Japan for concluding the treaty. Hakodate is actually located on the southern western part of Hokkaido, the northernmost island. Thus, Kanagawa Treaty, signed in the year 1854, was a treaty that allowed for the two ports of Shimoda and Hakodate to be opened to American ships, allowed for American consular agent also to reside in Shimoda. Similarly, unequal treaties gradually were also signed with Britain, Russia and Holland. This is a picture Commodore Perry meeting the Imperial Commissioner at Yokohama. Shogunal troops of 1864, you can virtually see in picture how they were organized. External factors are the entry of foreigners heightened the discontent against the Tokugawa shogunate. The infuriated aristocracy reacted. Tosa clan demanded resignation of Tokugawa in 1867. Satsuma and Choshu alliance of 1866 was in place. Slogans of Sonno Joi, that is, revere the emperor, expel the barbarian, became virtually a national slogan which was prevalent throughout the Japanese islands, especially for the cause of restoration. Restoration, when we say restoration, mean restoration of authority to the emperor. Samurai of Choshu clan, you can take a look from this picture. Restoration occasion. On 3rd January 1868, armed contingents from Satsuma and Choshu stormed the imperial compound in Kyoto, and same day Emperor Matsuhito ascended the throne and assumed the title of Meiji. The resistance came to an end only in May 1869 when Tokugawa navy surrendered. Meiji Emperor moving from Kyoto to Tokyo, it is well a distance of about 400 kilometers from Kyoto to Tokyo. Those days it was only by land means. This is the emperor moving, young emperor, Meiji Emperor moving to Tokyo from Kyoto. Impact of Tokugawa decline needs to be counted or recounted. Decline of rigid social stratification happened. Opening of Japan to the world also happened. Thereby Japanese contact with the world expanded. Japanese trade contacts, commercial contacts with the world, including that of large East Asian area, also occurred this period. Spread of modern ideas from West to Japan and from Japan to rest of the part. Both pro-Western and pro-nationalists could be seen. Spread of modern ideas thus, and also literature from the West happened not randomly but very fast. Restoration of monarchy as the de facto head of Japan. To be included in the slide relating to social structure. Now, having taken note of social structure, that we have emperor on top, we have shogun next, then we have daimyos, we also have samurais, and then we have ronins, we have peasants, we have artisans and merchants. Looking at this, it is sometimes become necessary because it relates to human society, especially a feudal society, to give some more information. Actually, we have samurais. Samurais relate to disciplined soldiers, and there are many varieties of soldiers. There were some people called ashigaru, who actually we call in English foot soldier. So, all gradations of samurais did exist those period, and they belong to the top social structure. When we say this caste system, like the top of the Japanese medieval society's class system were samurais. Then come the peasants. Peasants are the farmers who may have owned the land or who may have leased the land for certain tenure, and it was very necessary for the peasants to pay certain portion of their production as tax to daimyos. Daimyos, as they collected tax from so many peasants, so many holdings in their own domain, that constituted some kind. Tax is always revenue. Revenue is in expectation of certain expenditure the authority receives in the form of product. That product, usually rice, that was being sold, and money realized by that becomes the liquid or the cash for expenditure of daimyo, plus also maintaining his establishment in the headquarter. So, double headquarter maintaining of daimyo establishments, both in the shogunal headquarters in Tokyo, that is Edo, and one in the domain concerned. You remember that there were about 250 daimyos. There were so many establishments, and now the tax had to be spent for the benefits of the society, but mostly it was going to the meeting of expenditure from daimyos. Now you have peasants actually, since they depend for better crops on rains. There were no other advanced irrigation system available those days, and because of varying scale of production between years, their taxation was not very regular, nor of a uniform standard, nor even of a fixed amount. So, payment of tax was necessary, collection of tax was well disciplined. So, samurais and daimyos virtually extracted tax in the form of production agricultural crops from the peasants, and then we had artisans who were usually construction workers, and because of expansion of city in the medieval period or very early modern Japan, we have construction industry growing, and artisans virtually found employment throughout. Last, we have merchants. Because of declining status of samurais at different period, we have them borrowing money from the merchants. Disciplined samurai, educated samurai, they were sometimes jobless, since ronins, masterless, they were easily amenable for employment by merchant class, that is the business class, and often it so happened that merchants' daughter were married away to samurais, and samurais who are neither bureaucrat nor ronins sometimes had good establishment family connections. Otherwise, if we are treating samurais and merchants as different class or caste, now later period of Tokugawa, we find these two castes or these two class intermarrying with each other. So, now we have in a way very well disciplined order that had prevailed in medieval Tokugawa period or medieval feudal period. Feudalism actually is some kind of a if not necessary stage in the history of every country. Somehow most of the societies, most of the nations in their evolution process from medieval to modern have experienced feudalism, not necessarily a historical developmental stage in a society, but it is necessarily an experience most of the nations had. Therefore, we find social conditions prevailing in most part of the world, particularly if we are talking of Japan, Japan's history, society during Japan's historical period. It refers to that period when most of the relationship of both the administrators, that is authorities, and the people, it was related to land and activities relating to land. Thus, feudal period of Japan becomes very, very important. The fall of Tokugawa relates actually to end of feudal period, transition to the modern period. When it was felt it is necessary to transform from feudal to modern under the external pressure, that is Commodore Matthew Perry entering Japan by successfully concluding commercial treaty in the year 1854, that is Kanagawa Treaty, then Japan's contact with the world actually expanded, and Japan actually exploited such a situation of borrowing ideas, institutions from West, particularly Europe, and then adopting or applying those Western ideas into multiple fields for all-round national development, including education, including farming, including institution building, and even construction, for example, even fashion, for example. There are therefore many areas into which Japan had to transform with all the ideas borrowed from West. But however, Japanese did not ignore respect for their own tradition. However, in the postmodern or contemporary period, when we look at Japanese society, that it has a strong root in tradition, it has retained most of the traditional social features in the form of cultural assets, and adopting at the same time, accepting at the same time many Western ideas. So, Westernism, modernism and Japanese tradition all go together today. It is all because of transition, all because of experience that Japanese society, Japanese political leadership did experience with the Western ideas. Therefore, Japanese social structure and the social situation that Japan experienced in the later feudal period, that is just pre-modern period, we find this event of fall of Tokugawa regime, which led to the establishment of Meiji Restoration, that led in turn to industrialization, modernization and westernization, that Japan during that period from 1868 to 1912, which is called Meiji period, which is coming actually under a separate course for you. In a separate module, you can experience different Japanese social and economic and political and institutional experiences. Though about the social structure of feudal Japan, we have mentioned that there were shoguns, that there were peasants, there were artisans, and there were certainly merchants at the last ladder. We have had a large social section which is falling outside of this traditional structure. They were called etas. Etas actually, now in the modern part of Japan, we call them even burakus. Burakus is actually outcasts. Outcasts lived actually outside of the establishment, outside of actually the village dwelling places in a hamlet. So, they were also called sometimes hamlet people. These are the people who are not allowed to mix with rest of Japanese people. These are the people who are doing actually the menial jobs, and they were actually post Meiji period and post World War II brought under the realm of human rights domain, and Japan consistently for some time neglected very rights relating to these buraku people, and minorities come much later, that is Koreans, Chinese, etc. However, buraku people struggle that actually was carried on for a long time, won for them at least respect among rest of the Japanese, and thus we have to recognize the position of buraku people in Japanese society, that is actually fallout from the feudal Japanese society. Thank you very much.